right, Nero, Legacy of a Despot. Kind of funny. I do not like this game, but I also don't think it deserves the shitty rating that it has on Board Game Geek completely. What I don't like about it is the way it's played. It's just the kind of game that irritates me. I don't like the kind of strategy that's involved in it. But I think there is an interesting strategy game in here. One that relies on a kind of maneuver that I just really don't enjoy playing. It's funny because when I first started realizing what the game was, I was like, oh, this is clever. There's something cool about this and whatnot. And I agree. I still hold to that. There is something clever going on in the way that you maneuver your pieces around to try to eliminate the enemy and try to scoop up more forces. It definitely has maybe not a runaway leader situation so much as if you fuck up, you can be in a hopeless position very, very easily. And if you don't catch the gist of the strategy of the game, you can end up in a very, very bad place. Without a lot of chance to recover from it. Because once you get into a very bad place, it's pretty much over. And I had a player quit, basically, because he was in a position where the best he could hope to do was get a couple of pieces at the end of the game and maybe score 3 points or something. So let me hit components. Phalanx usually puts out really good components for their games. And I'm not going to say that they didn't try here. They did. They put the same kind of production quality they tend to. The map, I'm only going to show part of it. Nice hard map. You can see it in the playthrough and whatever. But the areas in it are too small for the pieces that are involved in it. The pieces themselves, these high quality, thick pieces, I found them difficult to count, to tell you the truth. And there's a whole set of coins that I found their area control markers were actually of no value whatsoever because control of areas was way too fluid. Maybe if you, not of areas, but of provinces or whatever. Maybe if you maintained control of provinces or something along that lines, and maybe at one point the rules had something like that. They don't anymore. So you end up with all these little coins that basically are being used as area controls, where area control is easily accessible by just looking at the board in most cases as to what troops are present on the board. And then when it's not easily accessible, you're going to have to keep recalculating it anyway. The little counter on there isn't going to help at all, right? You're going to have to keep recounting and looking. And there may be some cases where maybe it serves some slight purpose on the board, but otherwise no player needs more than 4 of these to indicate the major areas that they control, which is a little bit, it's still pretty easy to assess, but it's a little bit more stable, perhaps. Fucking standees, again, high quality, the cardboard's thick, but they're too easy to knock over. They end up just being an annoyance. I would much rather counters that went on top, use some of the space for the coin counters to put these leader counters. The distinguishing feature of whether you're an emperor, contender, or general is difficult to see, and yeah, the cards are of surprisingly low quality. They don't feel it when you first touch them, but they very quickly start degrading and wearing. I think that's actually probably an across-the-board thing with Phalanx. I seem to remember what seemed like nice cards getting damaged a little too easily in other games of theirs, but maybe I'm just misremembering, so who knows. On the cards, there are events which deal with these pictures, which are then reproduced in miniature in both the rules and on these player aid cards, and are not terribly evocative of what they mean. It takes a fair amount of time to get a good idea of what you're looking at. I would have much rather if the artwork was much simpler, the busyness of it, and then the reproduction on small scale, similarity between different cards in terms of appearance. I just found that, a hindrance to the game. The rules are absolutely fucking atrocious. They contradict themselves, there are ambiguities. I managed to screw them up anyway, even within, what I was dealing with. But they are a real mess, and I believe they're probably what caused the rating to be as low as it is on this game. But I think that I came up with the intention behind the rules. I'm not absolutely certain. Again, they're that bad, that I kind of got I got a pretty good feel for what the rules intended to make out of the game. And it is an interesting strategy game, a game of maneuver, a game where you want to collect your forces up into, a stack or so that you're in a position where you can kind of surround a small force and then smash it, and then you take it over. And that mechanism of taking over enemy units when you fight them is a part of what causes, again, not quite the runaway leader, but the sinking loser. It's just very easy to get yourself in a position where somebody can start smacking you around pretty hard. But again, with the ambiguities in the rules, maybe I'm missing something, maybe a different intention was in play. The real flaw that I have, or not flaw, the real problem I have with this game, first of all, historically, it has no value at all. If you have any interest in playing a historically based game as opposed to themed game, because it's dripping with theme, man. It's got legions and assassinations and all that kind of shit, right? And rules that prevent you. This is the one I fucked up most notably. Rules that prevent you from moving armies into Rome, even though in the imperial period that was no longer followed at all. But anyway, certainly in the midst of a civil war, it was not an issue. Not that anyone went and captured Rome like from someone else or fought a major battle right in Rome. That didn't happen but the way the maneuvering happens on this, the way the jockeying for position throughout the empire happens, feels nothing historical to it whatsoever. The board itself, this was sort of the first thing for me. The board itself includes Germania as Roman province, which they never were. A little bit of hand-waving. You can say, well, a general who's in charge of suppressing Germania would be in charge of their... they have revolts from the period, notably the Judean revolt, but there are also potential revolts in Britain, in Greece. I don't know where the... Germania doesn't have a revolt, I think. Well, there's 4 of them. Judea, Greece, Britain. There's got to be one for a yellow province as well. I just don't know which one it is. I don't think it's well marked. It's going to be on this card, though. No. I'd have to find the specific card to figure out which one it is. Is there a yellow one? There must be. Yeah, there's a yellow one. It is... Well, wait, there's 2 yellows. There's 4 colors in the game. And there's 2 yellows. Oh, I don't know where it would be. It might be Pannonia. That would be the most likely. I don't remember seeing it. Now I have to look. I don't fucking remember seeing the card come up at all, which is weird because 2 I know about so far. 3rd one I know about is Britannia. They've got one for Germania Superior. There's also a German revolt, which or a German, I don't know, rebellion, I don't know what the fuck it's called, which does slightly different things, and there's the potential of rebellious legions. But anyway, the way the mechanisms of the game work is you're allowed to play like 4 cards in your turn, and it works very much like a CDG. The cards have 3 values on them. They have a movement point value, which is, sort of your ops point equivalent. They have an event. They have other symbols here which tell you when the event can be played and to what effect. But then every card also has a combat value. So it's a little bit, it gives you a little bit more choices of what you can do with cards in than most CDGs will. Now, like I said, the movements is kind of your ops points, but they don't have a lot of different operational choices. Basically, it allows you to point to one province and move the pieces in that province using those movement points. And the rules on that are ambiguous as hell and sometimes contradictory or appear to be. But the actual play, what it comes down to is that you want to get numerical superiority of legions, and the way that you end up doing, and that wasn't immediately obvious, okay? That was not immediately obvious in turn 1. But as I began to see that was the case, the way that you go about that, because legions can almost always retreat, is you've got to get them in a position where they're either cornered against the edge of the map in some place like southern Italy, which I can show you, or let's take Dacia as an example. This is not cornered, so if you attacked from here, they could retreat into here. But the way you prevent that is by kind of surrounding pieces. And early in the game, pieces are spread out all over the map, and it's pretty easy probably to whack other people's pieces. When they withdraw, they take a penalty, which makes them harder to activate. But they can keep withdrawing. Now, you can use event cards to prevent withdrawals. You can use event cards to stop movement. You can do all kind of stuff like that within it. But what it really ends up being is this looking at and assessing your cards and figuring out how you can kind of maneuver your stack so that you leave enough little pieces behind, pieces that are now in danger, right? To surround the enemy so he can't retreat, and then smack into him, capture a piece, and then you're now in the midst of all these little pieces that you've split off, so they're going to be able to retreat, so they're not really into the space that you're in, so probably, unless there's enemies there, so they're not going to really be able to be captured very easily. And that's the other thing. The legions don't get destroyed or anything like that. There's no building or anything like that. All there is this concept of when you win a battle, you capture one legion from the enemy. The goal of the game is points. You get points for a number of things. Controlling areas. There are 4 areas in the game. Basically, controlling the majority of the provinces in the area gets you the points for the area. Being the emperor, and there's multiple routes to become an emperor. There can be 2 at a time. There's also, and those are, trying to remember. So, yeah, I think there's only 2. One of them is to have the people of your home region, have your home region under control, have the right event card to have your legions declare you, imperator or whatever, and then move into Rome and sit there. And then if you start your turn in Rome, you become an emperor. But only if there's 2 or less, only if there's 1 or less emperors can you do this. The other way you can become emperor is by defeating an emperor in battle, in which case you just become the emperor and they become a nobody. And both imperator and emperor give you a little bonus in battle. You get to play, as a player, you get to play no more than 4 cards in your own turn, which means if you want to react to stuff, if you want to do an assassination, something like that, you've got a very limited number of cards you can play. I found that it was valuable to kind of jockey for having the last couple cards in the turn. You could do a lot with them because you knew that nobody was going to be able to react and everybody else was out of cards. So you could you had a deterministic knowledge of what would happen. If you know me, I'm not a big fan of games where you can absolutely tell what is going to happen in a deterministic fashion. But that's the kind of game this is. The thing it kind of reminds me of, more in terms of my reaction to what it's like to play it than anything to do with the strategy and the actual movement involved in it, because the movement involved in it is this kind of weird surrounding action and reduction, and then also in each turn has its own little pattern, right? At the beginning of the turn, you want to collect your forces up, and you want to add to your legion, the size of your legions. But then at the end of the turn, you want to spread your forces out so you can get more points in areas and whatnot. Which is kind of cool. I mean, there's nothing I dislike about that. What I dislike is the actual mechanisms by which you try to bring somebody to combat, and how easy it is to avoid combat, and how frustrating the game feels when you're playing it. And what it does remind me of in those sort of the spirit of the game rather than the actual mechanisms in play, is 3M's Feudal. That's a game that kind of looks like, oh, this will, and it's a very similar kind of feeling. Oh, this is going to be so cool. With Feudal, it's like, let's play chess, but I can move all my pieces at once, right? And it sounds like a neat idea. It ends up just being this frustration for me. And this feels in a very similar sort of way of this, it just doesn't feel like I can do the kinds of things I feel like I should be able to do and want to do. And when you start looking at it as not some sort of simulation or anything, but an abstract game, you can kind of see, okay, it's an abstract game, and I like that kind of game, or I don't like that kind of game. And in my case, I just don't like it. It doesn't appeal to me. There's too much complexity, too much counting, too much trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. What'll happen if I do these things. And then there's a little bit of uncertainty in terms of you don't know what the opponent has in terms of cards. There can be some bluffing and all that involved in that. But it just ends up irritating me is all. And, you know, I can see, though, where some people would actually enjoy this, and I think I think the rating on BGG does not reflect the percentages of people who would enjoy it if they took the time to kind of really suss out what the rules want to do. You might not get the rules correct, but in terms of like what was intended or whatever, but you might still get a game that you like out of it. I just got one that frustrates me. All right, that's it. Up it goes.